Have you ever met someone and thought, something's off? I can't explain it, but something's off. And then, weeks later, you were right. Most people would call that paranoia. But what if it's not? What if the people who trust least are actually the ones who see the most clearly? Because here's what psychology is starting to reveal. The mind that guards itself carefully often understands people more deeply than anyone in the room. So today, we're not talking about trust issues. We're talking about what's really going on inside the minds of people who don't trust easily, and why it might be one of the most misunderstood strengths a person can have. You notice something before most people do. Before the conversation even ends, you're already reading between the lines, replaying the exact words someone used, noticing what they didn't say. There's a version of you that wants to believe people, genuinely wants to, but there's another part that stays back, watching, waiting for the moment when the mask slips. And here's the part that might surprise you. This doesn't mean you're cold. It doesn't mean you're damaged. It means your brain learned something a long time ago that it hasn't been given a reason to unlearn yet. So what's actually happening in the minds of people who don't trust easily? Because this isn't about being difficult. This isn't about pushing people away on purpose. If anything, the people who struggle most with trust are often the ones who feel everything the most deeply. They want connection, they crave it, but something inside them treats closeness like a door that leads to a room they've been hurt in before. And the brain, brilliant, stubborn, protective, says, not again. You are not broken, you are not flawed, you are someone whose nervous system learned to protect you. And for a long time, that protection was exactly what you needed. Here's the first reason this happens. Somewhere in your past, trust was broken by someone who was supposed to be safe. Not necessarily in a dramatic way. Sometimes it was small. A parent who said one thing and did another, consistently enough that your nervous system started running calculations in the background. A friend who disappeared when things got hard. Someone who used your vulnerability against you the moment you let your guard down. The brain doesn't forget that. It builds a model of how people work, and that model becomes your operating system. Researchers call this your attachment style, the invisible blueprint that shapes every relationship you walk into as an adult. If that blueprint was built in an environment where love felt conditional or safety felt unreliable, your brain doesn't suddenly switch off that wiring just because you're older now. It keeps running the same code, watching, testing, waiting for proof. And here's what nobody says out loud. That caution kept you safe when safety wasn't guaranteed. It was smart. It was adaptive. The brain's only crime was being too good at its job. The second reason runs deeper. When you've been disappointed by people, especially people who mattered, you don't just lose trust in them. You start to lose trust in your own judgment. Because the thing that haunts people who struggle to trust isn't just other people. It's the memory of a time they believed someone they shouldn't have. And being wrong about a person, especially one you let all the way in, feels like a betrayal of yourself. So the protective wall isn't just about keeping others out. It's about protecting your own sense of perception, your own ability to read the room. Because being fooled once makes you question everything you thought you knew. And that's a kind of internal earthquake that changes the ground you walk on. But here's the part nobody tells you. The brain, in trying to protect you from being wrong again, sometimes keeps you from being right. It starts pattern matching everything against the thing that hurt you most. A kind gesture becomes suspicious. Consistency feels too good to be true. Vulnerability starts to feel less like connection and more like exposure. The very skill that was protecting you starts to work against you, and you feel it. That tension between wanting to let someone in and not quite believing it's safe to, that's not paranoia. That's a nervous system still running an old program in a new situation. The third reason is about control. For people who grew up in environments that were unpredictable, emotionally, physically, or otherwise, Certainty became something precious, something you had to create yourself because no one was creating it for you. And when you can't predict people, when their behavior doesn't follow a logic you can track, something in you goes on high alert. Trust requires surrender. It asks you to let go of needing to know. And for someone who learned that letting go means getting hurt, that surrender doesn't feel like peace. It feels like danger. So the brain does what it always does. It finds ways to stay in control, to stay one step ahead, to need less, so that you're never caught off guard by how much you need. The fourth reason is identity. People who don't trust easily have often built themselves into someone who doesn't need much from others. And after years of living that way, that independence becomes part of who they are. It's not just a coping strategy anymore. It's a self-concept. If you stop being guarded, who are you then? So opening up doesn't just feel emotionally risky. It feels like a kind of identity loss, like admitting that the self-sufficient version of you was always a little bit of a story you told yourself to survive, and that story kept you going. There's nothing wrong with it. But it does make trust feel like giving something up, not just letting someone in. As you get older, something shifts. The same guardedness that felt sharp and necessary in your 20s starts to feel heavier in your 30s. In your 40s, you watch people move through relationships with a kind of ease you can't quite access, and you wonder if something in you is broken. It isn't. What's actually happening is that life is showing you the cost of the armor, not to shame you into taking it off, but because part of you is ready to ask whether it still fits. The brain that built the wall is the same brain that can begin, slowly, to examine it. Not tear it down, just examine it. And through all of it, the watching, the testing, the holding back, the real function of all this is regulation. Distrust is a kind of anchor. It gives the nervous system something to hold on to when the world feels unpredictable. It is, in the truest sense, a way of managing fear. Not a weakness, not selfishness. A nervous system doing what nervous systems do. Seeking the familiar, avoiding the painful, keeping you tethered to something solid when everything else feels like open water. It's an old friend that showed up when you had no one else. And old friends are hard to say goodbye to, even when you've outgrown the reason they came. So, if you're someone who doesn't trust easily, this is what I want you to hear. You are not too much. You are not too guarded, too wounded, too complicated to be loved well. You are someone who learned, in the best way you could, to take care of yourself in a world that didn't always make that easy. The wall you built wasn't a mistake. It was an answer to a question the world was asking you. And the fact that you're still here, still curious, still wondering about the way you connect with people, that's not dysfunction. That's the most human thing in the world. You don't need to be fixed. You just need to be understood. And maybe, slowly, you're starting to believe that you deserve to be. Not because you changed, but because you finally understand why you became this way.